This week's guest is someone I've known for a long while. She is a female powerhouse in the world of music, having previously worked with the likes of Jungle, Adele, Radiohead, Hot Chip, and now, following her previous roles at Universal Records and Beggars, leads one of the biggest independent music distributors in the world, Tunecore. In 2024, Tunecore announced that they have helped generate over $4 billion of revenue for independent artists. And with huge support coming from the likes of Jay-Z and Drake, I can assure you this is not a podcast you want to miss.
One of the obvious highlights is Adele, working with her from the very beginning and just being a real part of that journey across the first 3 albums. Just absolutely mind-blowing.
What would be the advice you'd give an artist that wants to be a Russ and wants to be someone that really has success on a distribution platform? What factors should they be considering?
When I was at the Orchard, I worked with BTS. That's a lesson in superfans. Blew my mind.
The industry, mercifully, thankfully, has changed a lot since then.
Yeah. I mean, if you did that now, can you imagine how massively cancelled you'd be, and rightly so? There is a very real issue with streaming fraud. We had Joss Stone release recently. All of the Forever Living Originals work is on there. So, you know, you've got Cleo Sol, Salt, just absolutely iconic names.
Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the Blind Talent Music Industry Podcast with me, Mark Adams. Thank you for coming.
Oh, hang on. I fucked that up.
No, you didn't. Not at all. Look, the thing is, this is just a conversation. And you know what? We can fuck it up all day long. It's all right. The camera's rolling. Let's just go.
Brilliant. Thank you. So good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to have the opportunity.
Nice. Well, look, we're going to get really into it because, you know, you've just had a huge big up. Okay. So now we're going to get really into it. So look, we're going to start nice and easy. Okay. So can you just share a little bit about your journey into the music industry so far and kind of why the music industry?
I loved school. I absolutely loved it. I'm not going to make this a therapy session, by the way.
Please do.
But
how do you really feel?
How do you really feel? I liked a lot of different things, but I never knew what I wanted to do. Like I wasn't, I absolutely love science, so I'm going to be a doctor, or I really want to be a lawyer, or, you know, anything kind of more traditional. And, you know, careers advisors don't sit you down and go, you'd be really good in the music industry. Certainly not in the 1990s. And what I really liked was words and writing. So, you know, I got to 16, 17. I was music obsessed from the age of 13, thanks to the evening session. Thank you very much, Joe and Steve. Absolutely obsessive. And I was like, okay, I like words and I like music, so I will train to be a journalist. And that's what I did. I moved up to London, went to City University and started a journalism course. Absolutely loved it. And they had so many amazing industry connections that at the end of year 1, The Face, which was based around the corner from City, Kevin, who was I think he was like the culture editor there, came in and was like, if any of the students want to help out with our annual drug survey, which I don't know if you remember that, but they used to do it every year, annual, and it always had massive headlines off the back of it. Like, you know, the whole of the UK is taking ketamine, or everyone's off their heads on coke or whatever.
What was it that year?
There was a lot of cocaine. And yeah, I did the survey. So literally over a weekend, took out my little clipboard, went round Hoxton asking everyone what drugs they took, basically. And from there, I then started to do some music pieces for The Face. So I actually found one of them the other day. I was the first person in the UK to write about the years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I actually literally only found that piece this week. And then from there, I started to temp at Time Out on their music section.
Right.
And then they said, oh, there's a maternity cover coming up. Would you like to take it? And I thought, oh, I'm right in the middle of a degree. Do I do what I want to do, or do I continue training to do what I want to do? And my heart just said, right, you've got to go and do it because this opportunity might never come up.
Yeah.
And it was the perfect mix of the two things that I loved. And I did about a year there. And I got to write about so many of my favourite artists and just really embed myself in the London music scene. It was invaluable.
Look, you have had an incredible journey so far. You know, I was talking about this beforehand. You know, some of the artists that you've had touch points with, like Jungle, Adele, Radiohead, and God knows how many millions, by the way, just through Tunecore alone.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to kind of hear a bit from yourself. Like, what have been some of your highlights so far?
I mean, it's, you know, I've been in music now for exactly 20 years, which makes me feel very old. I started very young. And I mean, you know, one of the obvious highlights is Adele, working with her from the very beginning and just being a real part of that journey across the first 3 albums. Just absolutely mind-blowing. And
Was you there right at the beginning?
right at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I remember going to her showcase when Simon Amstell was hosting it. Was you there at that one?
Yeah, the XL one.
Yeah, and Simon Amstell was... Jack Peñate was headlining.
Jack Peñate, who uses Tunecore.
Even to this day?
To this day, it's very
Big
funny,
up
actually.
Peñate.
I do joke. There's quite a few old XL artists who use Tunecore now. It's a bit of a reunion. So we have Jack, Subtract, Lapsley, and it's lovely because...
But do you remember that showcase, though? Do you remember when she came... She was first
I
out.
remember it so well, but I also remember seeing her upstairs at... What was the venue that was opposite the Barfly? There was like a tiny, tiny little venue there. And there was a lineup. It was headlined by Laura Marling,
Right.
Florence and the Machine,
Right.
Jack Peñate, and Adele.
Right.
Playing to like, I don't know, 20 or 30 of us on a Sunday afternoon.
Nice.
You know, Adele rocking up, acoustic guitar.
Yeah, and that's the thing people don't remember, because I said this, I put this out on Instagram ages ago, a picture, because I've got a picture from that showcase. Weirdly, I don't know how, but she came out in this kind of floral dress with an acoustic guitar, which is quite a far cry from
Oh my God, absolutely.
Adele now.
Yeah.
And I remember she goes, I remember her first line was, "All right, everyone?
You're right.
All right?
Yeah.
All right, everyone?" Everyone just kind of looked at her and went, "Oh, what is this?
Excuse me, dear lady.
What is this?"
But I was talking with the girls just before this actually about, you know, one of the reasons why she will be a forever artist, and it is her nature.
Yeah.
You know, she is one of the people who is truest to herself. Yeah, I've never met an artist that has that global resonance with people because she is just herself. Which is not to say she can't have diva moments.
Sure.
But she is just Adele.
Yeah,
She's Adele
but I
Atkins
also remember
through and
your
through.
the label at the time, XL, going, "Yeah, we're probably not going to get her to do too many interviews because she's a little bit of a law unto herself, and she did have a tendency to say things that maybe could halt her career or potentially get her cancelled.
Yeah,
but in a lovely way.
Exactly, in a way that was entirely her, and it wasn't anything. Nothing was kind of manufactured about it. You couldn't direct it because she wouldn't take that direction.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to say to her, make sure you say this or don't say this, because she's going to say what she wants to say.
Well, she's an inspiring female individual just anyway within the industry.
Absolutely.
Very vocal.
I mean, she has, you know, her journey has just been crazy. And, you know, as a musician, as a female in the industry, the success that she's had. I mean, one of the things that I will always remember is when she just had her little boy and she was flying back to LA, I think it was, and she'd done a really good job at kind of not being papped. And, you know, obviously kind of different pap rules there than there are here. And I remember seeing the photo of her stepping off the plane at LAX and, you know, having the baby on her front, and she just looked really vulnerable and terrified because it was like, this is such an intrusion and all I want is to be myself and to protect my son. And I'll always remember the look on her face in that photo.
Yeah.
You know, and I wasn't a mum at the time, I am now. And God, it was just really heartbreaking.
It's got to be tough.
So tough.
That is, I think, you know, more recently with Chapel Rowan talking about the different boundaries and, you know, look, hey, I accept it. I'm a celebrity, but I also, this is my work.
Exactly.
And this is my job.
Yeah.
And actually outside of that, leave me the hell alone.
Exactly. You know, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I think as the industry, we obviously court superfans, and yes, superfans equate to value within the industry. You know, they equate to loyalty and support and all of that. But you can't impinge on someone too much. You know, they're still a human.
Yeah. But how do you police that? You can't really police
hard.
that.
Well, and it's also so hard to have that balance between kind of industry management and artist, because from all sides that aren't the artists, you're going, super fans, really got to, in today's kind of multi-portfolio, multi-revenued industry, we've really got to concentrate on them. And you're like, what you can't do is do that at the cost of the artist.
Is the industry making superfans feel too entitled?
I think it probably is. I think having given them a new moniker, they're now almost kind of giving them carte blanche.
Yeah.
And obviously in today's day and age where there is so much access / intrusion into someone's life, it is hard to police. Everyone knows where everyone is all the time. I mean, so when I was at the Orchard, I worked with BTS. That's a lesson in superfans. Blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Their fans they're so phenomenal and they're so organised. So just a quick anecdote. I remember driving through London when I was working with them, and I was in the car with my husband and we were driving through Vauxhall, looked up and there was a out-of-home billboard advertisement. And he said to me, oh, did you do that? I went, no, we haven't paid for that. And Big Hit wouldn't have paid for that. And I found out that actually the fans all clubbed together. They clubbed their money together to do a happy birthday out-of-house billboard for each of the members on each birthday.
Right, okay.
I mean, that is better organisation than most media companies.
That is advocacy at its very best, isn't it? Surely.
I mean, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But obviously there's a flip side to that as well.
Yeah.
That kind of obsession, there will be a flip side.
Yeah.
But that just blew my mind. I mean, within the BTS fan community, there's all kinds of levels of kind of support and organisation and... it is absolutely brilliant, but it's equally a little bit terrifying as well.
I think fandom has always been terrifying.
Oh, it has. If we look at the Beatles.
Skirt back, exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Beatles, and I remember hearing a story once that the fans were so crazy at that point, and this is now in the 60s, right?
And obviously think that's first exposure as well. That's when teenagers were suddenly recognised.
Tom Jones talks quite openly about getting knickers and bras thrown at him on stage. I mean, setting women's rights back a little bit further, probably at the same point. But these sort of super fandom at that point was just screaming, people just screaming and just screaming and more. And so when we fast forward and we go to the mid 90s and Take That and Spice Girls fandom, and then we go into the late noughties of One Direction. I mean, there are definitely blueprints to this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and then you've obviously got the kind of. You've got the very sad side of it. You look at Liam Payne and, and everything that's happened there. And, I think there are a lot of big conversations to be had.
There's a few different areas in here that we probably need to be quite delicate and sensitive about. But I would say when we talk about fans and we talk about super fans, and I totally agree that moniker of super fan, it is kind of like treasured. Everyone's like, build your super fans.
I run a super fan app, and it's fans have always been there. They've always been, the backbone of most artists' revenue and of most artists' careers.
Yeah.
Without the fans, you're nothing.
Yeah.
But I think now there's a fine line between, on both sides. I think from industry to fan. And then from fan to artist. And I think there's almost a bit of a kind of Bermuda Triangle, isn't there, between who kind of sets the boundaries at which point. Yeah.
And social media probably has a bit to play in this because,
totally.
Of course, they're always on.
Yeah.
And maybe that creates pressures with artists and, we don't really know the true inner workings of why artists do the things that they do and how things happen. But I think you can probably make a good case for the fact that being in the public eye all of the time with this huge weight of pressure to be always on is probably not healthy. I think that's probably fair to say.
Absolutely not. And it's, I think, I'm not a mental health professional, but I think if you were to speak to any mental health professional, they would say, everyone needs an opportunity to retreat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You have to have the opportunity to go somewhere, close the door and be off.
Yeah.
You know, it's similar to the argument about kids and social media, isn't it? And, you know, what age they're allowed access.
Well, it looks like, is Australia about to ban social media for under 16? So by the time this goes out, social media in Australia is banned for under 16s.
Exactly. And, you know, I think the world will be a better place if we bring that in elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, young developing minds. And again, it's that question of being able to step away from an environment. And I think for artists, it's very hard for them to do that, especially when, you know, one of the things that we're encouraging them to do for their artistry is, you know, is to connect all the time.
I think sometimes things have to go so far the other way before we can bring things back to some sort of more sort of normality. And I think AI is a bit like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, you know, we're in a period with social media still, with AI, where, you know, everyone's in the discovery phase.
Yeah, and
you know,
that's just life, I think. Things always go like that, and then they come back and they normalise. And
so
going back to superfans, so BTS actually is kind of funny because they are unbelievable super fans.
Yeah.
You know, but I think at Blind Talent we talk. I talk more broadly about us, but only since much as because on my TikTok account I once referred to superfans as returning customers, which got quite an interesting array of comments back.
I was going to say, what was the feedback on that?
Well, I think that the purpose of it really was to try and explain to people from a marketing perspective where these individuals sit within your business of music.
Yeah.
And a superfan really is just a returning customer.
Exactly. That's essentially what any kind of retail-based loyalty is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I go on to explain, look, we're not saying that you should start referring to your fans as returning customers.
Good evening, returning customers.
Returning
Hasn't
customers.
Really got the same ring about it,
It's here's a loyalty card, 10 stamps, and although that's probably going to work too. It's just kind of getting back to the principles of fan growth, but I think the more that we move towards treating artistry like a business, the more we're able to put these boundaries in place for artists to feel like, actually, I've clocked off now. I'm watching my Netflix and I'm actually chilling.
Exactly.
Not what the young people think that means, but you know what I mean.
I'm allowed to. Sounds so childish, doesn't it? But, you know, this is my time. It is blocked out in the same way that sometimes, like, I will block out a morning of my week to just do my emails.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a meeting, it's nothing, but no one can block time in there.
Yeah.
Even as an individual, you have to compartmentalize your life, don't you? So I can imagine as an artist, there's a need for that even more, especially when what we're asking people to do is something that's creative and that's something that can't be timetabled. Having that kind of permissible block of time is really important.
I think it is. The industry we work in, that we chose to work in,
the always-on industry.
The always-on industry. I feel like we are a bit always-on, aren't we? I think as business entrepreneurs, people working in the industry, we're slightly paranoid and we've got to keep moving forward relentlessly.
Well, and, you know, we're in the creative arts, it's an industry based on hopes and dreams as well. And, you know, it's that classic thing, isn't it, of you take your eye off the ball, there's, you know, there's a queue of 200 people there waiting to do your job. It's, you know, that kind of old school way of thinking, I don't think ever really leaves you.
Well, I hope the industry has changed a bit over the years. And I've been lucky enough to work in the industry since 97 when I was just 17. And even back then, it was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Some of the things I saw in those early years, I was like, oh, shit. Like, do I want to work in the industry? I'm not sure, actually. And then you kind of get to.
Are you able to say, like,
not really? No.
Not really a fan of a lawsuit.
I think it's fair to say that the late 90s, as a young guy in the music industry, you kind of get exposed to a few things and go, oh right, wow, okay, people
That's
just do stuff.
Bit Kill Your Friends, was it?
Well, not quite. Although I had a bit of a circle moment when I met him, but it was more just, oh, okay, right. Because I was quite innocent, really.
Yeah, of course. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, music videos. Oh, my God, how great. And they must have some, like, people behind the screens pressing play.
I had a hilarious moment talking about kind of innocence and naivety. It was one of the first times I went to, I'm not going to name names, but it was one of the first times that I went to New York. And I think I must have been 22. And the company that I was working with at the time, it's quite an important important company. And someone said, do you need anything from the toilet? And I went, no, I'm fine. I don't need the loo.
Yeah.
It took so long for the penny to drop that by the time it did drop, I went, oh my God.
Yeah. What do you think I am? Yeah. I mean, I've got a similar
moments
story,
of
which I definitely
naivety.
won't share, but my team actually know, but which I won't share. But the industry was a bit like that. It was
Yeah.
for people who didn't come from necessarily seeing that kind of
Exactly,
wealth
had
and that kind
no
of
exposure to it.
debauchery
Yeah.
as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember one of the things that really opened my eyes was I went to an NERD showcase.
Oh God, what was that like?
Wow, this was in the early 2000s. And
Are we
of course,
talking around lap dance?
we are talking around lap dance.
Oh.
And guess where the showcase was held?
I mean, it must have been a strip club.
Well, it might have been. And so, but then you'd walk in and they had NERD dollars
Yeah.
that you could then,
Put in the NRD
exchange
songs.
for
Yeah.
things. Now, I didn't. I was that was way too above my station to even think in that way. But I can assure you that people I was with partaked. And it was kind of a bit mad for me to think, do I want to be in this industry this badly?
God.
But, it's kind of uncomfortable for
How
me as a
many
young
women
guy.
that weren't dancing were in the room?
Well, exactly, quite. And this is a significant point because the industry, mercifully, thankfully, has changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
And those kind of slightly uncomfortable moments
I mean, if you did that now, can you imagine how massively cancelled you'd be, and rightly so?
Absolutely. And I think this is kind of what we get into, because I think it's hard for me as a white middle-aged man to really kind of fully appreciate what it's like for being a lady in the music industry. And look, you've been in the industry a long time, a really powerhouse executive. And frankly, whether you know it or not, you'll be inspiring a lot of young ladies coming through the industry that are looking up and kind of going, okay, Sarah's like head of Tunecore. She's worked at Beggs. She's done all this amazing stuff at XL. There's room here. We can, and look, I was very lucky to also sponsor the Women in Music Awards this year, and we do it every year.
Which was fabulous. It always is. It's one of my absolute favourite dates in the calendar.
Absolutely amazing. It's so inspirational. I always feel a little bit kind of like, not should I be here? Because I think that's
No, but, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It can feel a bit like, oh, this is meant to be for us.
Yeah.
I even had someone leave a comment on my post, which was soundly deleted and blocked afterwards on my ad, around how the Women in Music Awards is simply just highlighting the issue and creating more division, and to that effect.
Yes, let's just ignore the issue.
Absolutely stupid. But anyway, but kind to it, I'd love to kind of hear a bit about your experience. I think people listening to this, whether they are someone that is an artist, a female artist, or curious bystander, or someone that really wants to work in the music industry that may be slightly worried about the industry and kind of that. But what's been your experience so far? I guess the good, the bad, and the ugly. And maybe where it's going.
I think it has definitely changed over the years, and I always question whether that's changed over the years because of the change in culture of being a woman in the music industry, or if it's changed over the years because of the change in my seniority.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
I go into a room now, I'm not expected to make the tea and take the notes, which for most of the 2000s I would have been.
Right.
And that, part of that, there was, you'd walk into the room, it would be mainly blokes, just like, you're gonna do the teas and stuff like that, and you think, Jesus Christ,
was that something you experienced?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And that's very tame considering a lot of people's experience of sexism and misogyny within the industry.
Yeah.
And I always think, right, no one would expect that now. And is that because of the level that I've got to, or because hopefully anyone can make the bloody tea now?
Yeah.
And anyone can take the notes. And I think it's the latter. I would really like to think it's the latter. I mean, I remember going out once with a French artist in the 2000s and him basically just assuming that I was there as a bit of eye candy.
Right. Okay.
Comments on the way I was dressed, comments on the way I looked, all of this kind of stuff in a very kind of lascivious way.
Right.
And
what do you think, there was some kind of expectation attached
yeah, I
to
think
the arrangement?
there was. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not going to say I've always been as confident as I am now, because I think when you're coming up through the ranks as well, you have this level of kind of questioning how you're expected to act as well.
Right.
Am I expected to be a little bit more lenient towards artists because they're the artist and I'm the kind of young woman in the room? I can tell you, anyone that's listening to this now, you are not expected to be like that. But, I think, again, when you can't see yourself reflected elsewhere, you don't really know what the rules are.
Right.
Whereas I think now, you can see that people have got to places on their own terms.
Yeah.
You're not there as a bit of an eye candy.
Yeah.
You know, you're not there, hopefully, as just the token woman in the room.
Yeah.
You know, you are now part of the 30 or 40% of workers within the music industry that are female now.
Yeah.
And there will be other women to look to in that situation, whereas I don't necessarily think there were. Certainly within the 2000s, it kind of changed towards the 2010s.
I must say I was very lucky in many ways at EMAP in particular, because they had a really fantastic senior lady there called Dee Ford.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And
yeah.
It was kind of great for me to see that in action. She was really bolshy and forward and quite passively aggressive at times. And I used to think, whoa, Jesus.
What powerhouse.
Fuck me. Like, I'm never going to cross her.
Yeah.
Not that I would intend to, but, it was just so kind of like, whoa. No.
Yeah. And there's such a fine line as well. And I think certainly more towards the early stages of my career as well, there would be the whole kind of women thinking that they needed to act as men.
Right.
As well. So, you become almost like the kind of slightly uber bitchy character.
Absolutely.
Whereas now it's so nice to just see females being themselves and actually being comfortable enough on their own terms.
Do you think they had to be a bit like that in the early noughties
absolutely.
in order
I think
to
it's
survive?
back to the pendulum that we were talking about, which is, as you break down those boundaries, and for a lot of those people, for a lot of those women, they'd have been the first ones breaking down those boundaries. You're setting new ground.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the rules are. And the only people you can see doing it are men. So, you're like, all right, okay, well, I'm going to have to act like that then.
Yeah.
Whereas now, obviously, there are a lot more examples of people that have done it on their own terms.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a rule across any part of life, but particularly within music as well. I think be what you want to see. If you want to see someone that is in a leadership position who has humility and intelligence and real passion, show that all the way throughout your career. Don't change yourself, don't adapt yourself for the role you eventually want, because that's a path to madness.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I think as I see this journey, and I think musicians have a lot to say in kind of changing the culture too. We talked a little bit about Adele earlier when you were working with her, because I think artists like Adele, Amy Winehouse, they set a different kind of bar that said, hold on, we can be creative, individualistic, we can be vulnerable, but we can be strong. Yeah. We can do all of those things.
Super feminine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think more recently examples like Self-Esteem and people like that.
Love Self-Esteem.
Yeah, well.
She's phenomenal.
But even as a male in the industry going, all right, and calling out certain stuff.
I absolutely loved sitting in my car with my husband and my daughter, who probably would have been, I guess, about 6 at the time, listening to that first track of hers that broke through and talking about it. Because it was so, I think we must have been listening to Six Music or something like that, because it stood out as so different sonically to everything else that was on. And I spoke to my daughter about it and, why she'd kind of written that track and what her experience, what her path had been to get there. I could listen to Rebecca Self-Esteem talk for hours. Just brilliant.
Yeah. And we need those kind of artists. And we're going to go on, obviously, to talk a lot more about Tunecore, which I haven't really talked too much about yet, because, of course, we've gone via Jungle and Adele and Radiohead
and BTS
and BTS. Well, I mean, look, super fandom is something that we can probably talk a bit more about. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's top of mind for everyone, isn't it? And and the other thing that super fans give us is data.
Well, let's talk about currencies in music, and we talk in metrics and different currencies. And I've said a number of times, the only metric that matters is fans or whatever, and streams, and not everything's created equal there. But why don't we just talk a little bit about the rise of streaming, because of course very fundamental to Tunecore,
absolutely,
and social media, and just how people are now approaching their careers because of these significant changes in streaming and social. We've been lucky enough to be in this over 20 years, right? So we've seen it change quite significantly, but streaming and social still relatively new in our
absolutely. I mean,
lifespan.
I had a real moment actually when I had my daughter in 2015, and When I left for my maternity leave in August of 2015, we were talking about streaming. It was important. Spotify was kind of top of mind. When I came back in March 2016, it was all anyone was talking about. And it's so funny because I think at that point where you step away for 6 months and you come back and suddenly you realise, right, there's a new leader in the playground. And that was one of those moments where you could just see the change, just so much. And yeah, it's completely changed the industry, hasn't it? I mean, you and I very much remember the days of, the only thing that you sold were CDs. You might have sold a little bit of vinyl.
Yeah,
sold,
the 90s were CDs really, weren't they?
And still a bit of tape, yeah.
Bit of tape, a lot of CDs, tapes mainly for piracy.
Exactly,
Down the boot market.
Or
it's
car journeys, yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into this detail, but I remember Spotify in 2014, I think it was, when I was invited. At the time, the app was just a thumbs up and a thumbs down. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And I saw this from a distance and thought, because at the time I was the head of music, I might have been directing music at that point, but whatever, at Channel 4. And I'm always curious about consumption and streaming apps.
Yeah.
So I went and visited them in their office in Holborn. They had a tiny little office.
Yeah.
And there was about, and I'll be real with you, it was about 20 white dudes from Holland.
Tech dudes, yeah.
And they were all giant. I'm 6'1". They're all 6'7".
Dutch people are generally very tall.
Yeah, but I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And so I walked into this office and I remember the marketing lady there, actually Holly, I think her name was, fantastic, really, really great. Really got what I was thinking, which was, I want to see the data. Can I see the data behind this? Because I feel like we could create some great programming with this. Now, at the time, they didn't have they didn't have the deal with Era.
Yeah.
They hadn't really done much with official charts. There was a few things bubbling around.
It took a long time for streaming data to go into the charts.
But that enabled me to get behind the scenes and actually get access to Echo Nest, which was their first ever data point that they had. Didn't have Universal Music at this point either because of that.
Yeah.
The common problem with Universal Music and platforms.
Exactly.
And that kind of stuff.
They don't like to lean in.
They like to just get an extra couple of pence out of it, don't they? But it was kind of interesting to me because then that's what ultimately led to the first ever streaming chart, which I created actually in the world.
Amazing.
Which is called the Box Plus Streaming Chart. And it was only called the Box Plus Streaming Chart because the official charts company owned the word official. Did you know that?
No.
Well, there you go. There's an exclusive for you. So once we got the streaming data from Spotify, we launched our own official Spotify streaming chart, built from only Spotify streaming data.
Yeah.
And there was a little kick up of a fuss. Let's just say there was a bit of a fuss around it, which meant that we had to change it to the Box Plus streaming chart. But it was still officially the first ever Spotify chart in the world.
That's amazing because it wasn't until, was it 2016 that it went into the OCC?
Absolutely. Once they'd done the registration with Era, then it was able to go and be on board.
Because there was a long time where we were trying to kind of, at that time it was like the Wild West as well, wasn't it? Everyone was working in their own stream equivalent equations and stuff like that. Yeah. And actually trying to...
just making it up is the truth.
Absolutely.
It was hilarious.
It up.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's this. Well, I think, that person's got a really long equation.
Well, Ed
so
Sheeran seriously benefited from it, right?
Yes,
there was a moment, I
absolutely.
think it was six Ed Sheeran tracks in the top 10.
Yes.
Because of this slightly mad equation that someone had just kind of dreamed up in an office.
Exactly. But, fast forward, where are we now? 8 years.
Yeah.
And, streaming is a second language.
Yeah.
That children are now born wondering how you could ever have existed without
They
it.
couldn't have imagined a time where you couldn't go on and get access to 20 billion songs.
Straight away. Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy for the generation that we are. Gen Z, are we?
Oh,
no,
God,
Gen
no,
X, sorry.
No, we're
Gen X.
geriatric.
Sorry,
we're
I'm Gen Z
millennial.
internally, I think.
We're geriatric millennials.
as long as I'm not a boomer, which someone once jokingly said I was, and
Ooh,
I was like, well, that's just offensive.
I actually think someone told me, so I'm 1981. I don't know what year you are.
79.
Okay, so I think you might be past the cut-off then.
Behave.
But to be called a geriatric millennial, I think is even worse because having anything with the word geriatric in it.
It's not a great start, is it? It's not a great start. It's not a great start. But, I don't mind owning that label because,
Exactly.
as someone said on a previous podcast, people these days, they often get seen as old because they've got experience. And that's slightly unfair.
Exactly.
That knowledge is still useful,
Absolutely.
But streaming has changed massively. And look, you're at the very cutting edge of this at Tunecore.
Yeah.
You see everything. You are, I don't know,
I mean, from the very beginning of people's journeys as well.
But are you the biggest independent streaming service in the world?
We are one of them.
Distributed service.
One of the biggest. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And obviously, being owned by Believe as well, it gives us access to a much wider ecosystem as well. So it means that things like our data analysis and business intelligence and all of that is, absolutely second to none because, we exist as part of a bigger ship.
Yeah.
But, it is quite incredible when you look at people's journeys from the very beginning on a platform like Tunecore.
Yeah.
You look at the artists that we work with today, for example, we've got Roisin Murphy, we had Joss Stone release recently, all of the Forever Living Originals work is on there. So, you've got Cleo Sol, Salt, just absolutely iconic names.
Yeah.
We've had 9 Inch Nails have used the service, Sonic Youth have, Chance the Rapper, Russ. And the thing is, because you're not contracted, people can dip in, dip out as well. But what we're finding is that as people become more educated as to what the service is, there isn't a need to dip out because, let's take Forever Living Originals as an example. A lot of smart management companies are building out essentially in-house labels with all of the functions that you would have previously had at a major or a large independent. And therefore they're able to have people in there that are dedicated to the artists, that are completely on board, not a case of I've signed so-and-so and 3 of my A&Rs have left.
Well, I read as well that Tunecore has generated over $4 billion.
Over $4 billion,
pounds
in $4 billion, and that was as of, I think it was earlier this year. So,
it's not bad, is it?
And actually, the time between the 3 billion announcement and the 4 billion announcement was pretty short as well. So it's a fast-moving train.
Yeah, and as a business, we work with just a lot of independent artists. We do work with major labels sometimes, but for the most part, we work with independent artists. And earlier on in the season of the podcast, we was talking to Nathan Phillips.
Oh, lovely Nathan from Nuclear Blast. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, previously Tunecore and kind of helped shape some of those.
He was me 2 people before me. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember not really knowing Tunecore at all, actually, until he got there.
Yeah.
And it put some really good things in place there. But really what I'm kind of getting to is clearly Tunecore's been on a journey and it's kind of grown, and we work with a lot of artists that use Tunecore.
Well, remember being an American company as well, there was definitely a job to do. I think there was a person in place before Nathan. There was definitely a job to do in terms of just localizing the information about the fact that we were here and the fact that we were global as well. So you've got that person that understands the territory, that understands what's needed to be done for UK artists.
Yeah.
Because, I think people like to know that there's someone that understands their territory too. And that's one of our USPs.
This is getting to the crux question, because we get asked all of the time by these artists, what distributor should I use? Now, if I had a penny for every time I was asked that question, I'd be a very wealthy guy. Now, of course, there's lots of distributors out there, and, we could name millions now. DistroKid, Ditto, Emu,
CD Baby,
The Lovely Rich. There's loads of great distributors out there. And often people say to me, what distributor should I use? And we go, there's pros and cons to all of these distributors. I mean, ultimately, they've got the same function to get your music from not on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms onto that.
The headline is the same. The details are different.
Yeah, and the cost price is different, and the cost is different. And there's lots of different variations in there. Some have other services that they bolt on. Yeah. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And I think, the question that follows this is, what distributor should I use? But what would they do for me? Will I get a Spotify editorial?
Yeah.
That's usually the thing that follows.
Will I get playlisted?
Get playlisted? How much will you do about that?
Yeah.
So that's, again, a question I think would be great for, I think, some of the listeners that may have a passing interest in either releasing music. But how do you go about choosing the right distributor? Now, I know clearly you've got your Tunecore hat on here, but taking that sort of to the side for the moment, what would be the advice you'd give an artist that wants to be a Russ and wants to be someone that really has success on a distribution platform? What factors should they be considering?
Obviously, goes without saying, make the absolute best music that you can. and then do a short-term plan and a long-term plan, I would say. With my Tunecore hat on, we've really developed over the last few years, and we are, I think, we're really responding to the industry as it is now with things like Tunecore Accelerator and, really working very closely with Believe to pivot now towards being a development platform as well as being a distributor. So, we're really understanding that actually what artists need are audiences. So, we're working with Believe's business intelligence team to really kind of understand the best things that we can do for our artists to make sure that they progress. To make sure that they get over those first 1,000 streams at Spotify and therefore their music becomes monetized. To make sure that they move up from the 1,000 stream to the 10,000 stream bucket. To make sure that their music is put into Spotify discovery mode at the right time and also that it's taken out at the right time. So, we've been doing a lot more work kind of behind the scenes on that. And it's, it is now out there in the kind of proprietary program that is Tunecore Accelerator.
But when an artist is choosing a platform, I understand that you're going to have a bias here for Tunecore, but when they are choosing the platform, what should they be looking at? So, for example, I would say to an artist, well, look at the kind of platform they are, the kind of artists that they have on their platform.
Look at the content on the website, for example.
Yeah, are they professional? Are they just a have a go Charlie? Are they actually not a distributor?
Are they going to take a royalty from you? Are you okay
How
with
much
that?
is that royalty?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are they going to just ask for a yearly subscription fee? Is there progression? Again, with my Tunecore hat on, we're part of Believe, and therefore there is an A&R discussion that happens all the time about things that go from Tunecore to Believe, about things that go from Believe to Tunecore.
Yeah, and we call that upstreaming is what we tend to call that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But what I don't like is the opposite of that, is when you call it downstreaming from one to the other.
Yeah, but I guess that also happens, right? An artist might not be big enough to stay with the Believe mothership and have to drop down to Tunecore.
Well, exactly.
I don't know, but I'm just thinking more broadly here for artists because whilst I appreciate there's going to be a bias here, a question that needs to be answered here is actually why or how does an artist choose what distributor to work with?
Leaning into your peers and getting first-hand experience, getting there, because, it's one thing to go on and do your kind of pros and cons list and look through, and I've garnered this from Google and that from Google and this, that and the other. But actually, first-hand experience from your creative community is priceless.
Yeah.
Because it might be that they've had a really amazing experience somewhere, or they've had a really terrible experience somewhere. And, it's not to say that every time that will be replicated for every artist, good or bad.
Yeah.
But I think speaking to your peers, the same way, as you would do with anything.
Yeah.
And I think when the choice lies with you, this is where it's different from getting signed. I've just done air commas, by the way, is, that's where the difference kind of comes into play, isn't it? You're sitting with the power rather than an A&R person sitting with the power.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you're going into a system that you haven't had experience with before, speak to those that have.
Yeah, and I think that's a great bit of advice, isn't it? Go and find out what other people's experiences have been. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that all people's experiences are going to reflect your own, because I think that can sometimes be, well, that person uses Tunecore and they've had 100 Spotify editorials.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, as an artist, you go on there, you don't get 100 Spotify editorials and suddenly Tunecore shit. Yeah. Because that's just how that sort of decision thing happens.
And you hear opinions based on pretty much nothing. But
and personal experiences,
it's personal experience, and it changes person to person.
Every single, I can be, being clear, every single distributor in the world, probably, certainly the ones we've ever worked with, I've never met one artist that hasn't had one issue.
Oh, absolutely.
My songs are uploaded to a different artist.
Show me an artist that's never had an issue with a label.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so this is the point: is trying to have a balanced view on this.
Of course it is.
Because I think we're often at the sharp end of it, where they're asking us, "Well, should I use DistroKid? I've heard they're taking a lot of songs down because of this, this, and this." I'm like, well, whatever they're doing, they can be doing it with the interest of the artist at the front of that, because they're trying to understand real consumption, etc. So try and make these changes.
And also there is a very real issue with streaming fraud.
Yeah.
And, different companies are dealing with it in different ways. But the bottom line is there are some pretty nefarious folk out there that are finding a way to game the system.
Yep.
And that money goes back into all kinds of horrible places that you don't even want to think about. So, every single distributor, ourselves included, have had to, really come down on that. And we've actually been part of creating a body in the US, which is like an official music fights fraud body, essentially.
I mean, I feel like we're getting into slightly a technical part of the industry, but I do think it's important, because I think the kind of people that might hear this might not even realise that streaming fraud is a thing.
Anyone that doesn't, if you Google streaming farm bots and watch the video of, I can't remember if it's...
Is this the video with like loads of phones in a row?
Yeah. It's basically loads of phones on tripods, just streaming. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's absolutely terrifying. Yeah. And then you think about where the source of that money goes to, and it's supporting all the traditionally bad and illegal things in the world. It's really scary.
Yeah, and I think it's probably hard for an artist to think too deeply about where that money's going after that, because their immediate concern is, can I get 100,000 streams?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I totally appreciate
But again, this goes back to what we were saying about, both of our early careers as well, is an industry based on hopes and dreams will always have people out there that are trying to manipulate it and are trying to, get to the source of that emotion, which is, I want my music, which is based on emotion, to be out there and to be successful.
Yep.
Someone comes holding what you think is the golden ticket, you're going to jump. But that's where we have a responsibility as distributors, the industry have a responsibility, education. Educate yourself to the nth degree. And I think even more now as an independent artist, you have to educate yourself on every single element of what you do and every single part of where your music will go, because you need to be able to hold people accountable as well.
Totally. And I think with, we can talk about a lot of different marketing activities that artists do. And we're quite staunch in our approach to that and trying to educate artists that, streaming numbers aren't the be all and end all of everything.
Oh gosh, absolutely
and
not.
actually taking this sort of third party playlisting approach where it's just a very dodgy game. It's just a game that we kind of, there are going to be bad characters in that, and some of them you won't even know. You won't even know. And there might be marketing companies out there that do a little bit of this, that they, with the best intention, are trying to get your music into the right places, and maybe it gets flagged by a distributor and it says, hey, this is fake. And you go, well, hold on a minute, I've not done anything.
Yeah.
Which is why increasingly, as a business, we're trying to educate artists to lean into the content, lean into best practice, lean into smart links, lean into pixels, lean into retargeting. Lean away from playlists, lean away from that, and understand that growing a fan base
will help you to then eventually reach the
solve
playlist.
all of those problems for you. And so there are great software tech programs out there, tech platforms out there that are helping solve some of this fan data issue that really is quite prevalent. And I don't think all of them got it right, but I think the mentality is right.
And again, like we talked about with the pendulum, it's still slightly Wild West out there. This year seems to have been the year of talking about superfan apps. I'm sure not all of them will exist this time next year.
No, and some of them are frankly rubbish. And also they're all built for exit strategy, which I totally get. Build a platform, quickly sell it to Sony. So no one really cares, and it goes back. It's just a different kind of exploitation. But don't get me wrong. I think some of these apps are fantastic.
I mean, OpenStage, for example, absolutely love it.
Yeah, Rob. Yeah, I was on a panel with Rob last week at one of your rivals, Ditto. I was on the Fangrove panel, and hey, look, this isn't a Tunecore podcast, right? This is this is an industry podcast. So ironic in some ways that I was on that panel, but I was on that panel and was talking a bit about the platforms out there. And again, there is OpenStage, of course, but there are many, many, many others that do a similar job.
So many.
That I could potentially argue either do a better job in certain areas, a bit like distributors. Some distributors are really strong at this, some distributors are really strong at that.
Some lean more into one area, some lean more into others.
And this goes back to your point around education. But firmly believe that building a fan base brick by brick is the absolute way to do it. And I think with companies out there, definitely I consider myself one of them, but we're not the only one. There are some other very, very good marketing companies in the UK in particular that really understand how to create content and use that content in a really effective and long-term way, which I think is also important.
Well, I think also understanding being an artist now, being a manager now, you know, you are running a portfolio career.
Yep.
You know, and I think it is different to how it used to be. You need to be good at so many things. You need to be good at creating the music. You need to be good at creating content.
Yep.
You need to be good live. You need to be good at having merch ideas. You know, you need to understand your publishing, because that's another area where, you know, it can be very opaque in terms of understanding.
Yeah.
But if you can understand and make a choice on that side, that's another revenue stream. And I think understanding revenue streams probably go across two hands now for an artist at least.
Oh, I would argue probably loads more, because of the very nature of our business is that every artist now is fundamentally an independent business.
Exactly, is an entrepreneur.
But that's really hard for a title for an artist to take on board.
Totally. I mean, it's a huge amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm always very honest with this, with people, you know, talking about being independent, going in alone. You know, it is a lot of work. It's a hell of a lot of work. The rewards can be incredible in terms of artistic freedom, in terms of owning your own income streams, all of those things. But it is a lot.
It's a lot, and I don't think, and again, partially why this reason we having this conversation today is to try and help educate artists. And I do wonder if, you know, what are the common misconceptions that you hear about distributors?
Probably that they'll do more for you than you think.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that come and ask us for marketing investment or ask us for a marketing plan and things like that. That's not the business we are. There are businesses out there that will do that. And it might be right for you, it might not be right for you. But again, it goes back to understanding what each company can do for you. And, you know, like we were saying, pros and cons for what you need at that time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, just sort of stepping back one, just because I was saying, it popped into my head and I thought, I must ask you this. I've asked a few people this question. With streaming, and I think in particular Spotify in this instance, one of the things I've been banging the drum for about 4 years, no one's listening yet, so please keep listening to the podcast. Someone might listen to me one day, is I really believe, just stepping into that sort of streaming forward and the numbers thing, I don't really believe that the numbers should be on Spotify. I think they should remove all
the whole industry would fall apart.
Well, or would it actually create a platform that isn't so ego-driven and vanity-driven? And would it actually stop a lot of this exploitation with streaming farms? Because if you can't see the numbers publicly, why would you buy them?
God, wouldn't it be interesting?
I was somewhat inspired by Instagram when it gave you the option to turn off your likes.
Yes.
And I thought, wouldn't that be nice if the stream platform was said to the artist, you can turn off your streams if you like.
I mean, I do think the genie is now far too far out of the bottle.
Sure.
But my God, I would love a trial of that.
I firmly believe, and I have presented this idea to a few people, and every one of them pretty much has gone, I can't necessarily see a negative of that, because if you're Taylor Swift and you've got billions and billions of streams, I don't know what that's providing to your audience that they don't already know.
No, I mean, you know, just the super fans will be like, right, come on, let's help her get to the next billion.
Oh, let's help her get to 4 billion.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if they would think that. I don't know. I actually don't know. But my feeling is that it would probably go, this is just a platform that you can listen to music on.
I mean, I tell you what is interesting is that they don't put the number of streams under 1,000. So it's not like the fans go, come on, they're on 800. If we get them to 1,000, then they're monetizing. That's quite nice to think that actually people would be thinking like that. There's something quite sweet.
There is something sweet about that. But it's still only 1,000 streams. And,
absolutely.
But 1,000 streams is that's 100 people listening 10 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think when you start to think of fandom, and we talked about fandom with BTS, and it works in that context, right? If you've got 10,000 fans and they're listening to your song 100 times a day because they just love you so much, that all
it will only
sense.
be monetized up to, I think is it 7 times? There's a limit.
Okay, but
it isn't counted past a certain point.
Wonder,
but still, you know, I think, right, how many times did I listen to Dogman Star in a day? I would have definitely been one of those super fans on Spotify going, right, come on, let's get them to the next 100,000.
Yeah, and there's definitely something in there. I just think there's a discussion to be had there around how useful these numbers are publicly being displayed.
Well, not only publicly, but also within the industry. You know, what do we judge people on? Well, the measure for success, the measure of how someone is doing, quite often, you know, for the majority of the industry, the first place they will go to is what are their Spotify stats.
Yeah.
You know, you imagine you take that away, where are you going to go?
But how helpful is that? Because I said this to an artist the other day, and I said, you need to stop thinking about streams. Your mum, your brother, your friends, your fans at your very low level, the fact that your music is somehow even on Spotify, regardless of how many numbers they got, is fucking incredible. They can't quite understand how your music is on this platform, and they can hear you singing on this platform.
Yeah, and that the access to release is so democratized that you can do that. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know,
who
again,
are they talking to with the numbers?
You
Only
tell
to the industry, aren't
17-year-old Mark, 17-year-old Sarah that you can do that.
Yeah.
Mind's blown.
Hey, look, when this podcast was added onto the various streaming platforms, I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
My voice is on there now.
Absolutely.
How did that happen? Well,
But, you know,
that happened.
I sometimes feel like we need to connect a little bit more with like 17-year-old us, because it's like the humility we were talking about before of, you know, oh, have I really achieved anything? And actually ask yourself what 17-year-old you would think if they saw you doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
You know, for anyone. That goes for, you know, anyone
100%.
within the industry, an artist, you know, an industry professional, a manager, anything. And, you know, I think that gives you a bit of a reality check sometimes, because it's easy to get bogged down and to not actually think, wow, I've achieved something. And, you know, whether that achieving something is you've made a track and you've got it up on the services, or, you know, I've made a track and I've got my first 1,000 streams. I've got my first 100,000 streams. You know, it's each of those is a milestone.
Absolutely. And look, we work with creatives that are very high in the emotional intelligence spectrum. They can be vulnerable, but they feel like they can't show
demand a lot
it.
of themselves.
Yeah. And we've got a responsibility in the music industry
100%.
to make sure that we're hearing them. But let's talk a little bit, because I'm kind of conscious that we're coming towards the end of the podcast, but I'm really interested because you've worked with some amazing artists. We've already talked about some of them, Jack Pignati, Jungle, Radiohead, you know, the list goes on. In terms of to date, because you've got many, many years ahead of you of inspiring young ladies to come into the industry and fucking boss it, right? Because that's what we want.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
want the industry to be more representative. We want the industry to be filled with more thoughts, more references, more creativity.
Yeah, more diversity.
More opinions, more diversity, exactly. So, but I really want to know, to date, what's one of the most memorable projects that you've been involved in and one that you feel like really proud of?
So there's a couple of moments that really spring to mind. So probably 3 key moments. I will always remember, even in the middle of all the Adele stuff, I was still a bit like, you know, I'm working it, but, you know, it's not really anything to do with me, despite the fact that I was, you know, running the international department for the 3 albums and all of that.
That's a little bit to do with you,
And
I'd
then
say.
I really clearly remember being at an award ceremony, and I can't remember which one it was, which is terrible. Jonathan Dickens was up on stage, who manages Adele, and he has done since the beginning. And he thanked me by name and my boss, and, you know, said the international success of this wouldn't have been the same without you. And that was an absolutely floor me moment. You know, I remember just being, wow, that was real. You know, it was almost that validation. Just absolutely knocked me sideways. It was just fantastic.
I bet that felt amazing.
It felt incredible.
Yeah.
I felt like every single pair of eyes in the room was on me, which it wasn't. No one knew who I was. But for me, I was just
Do
like...
you know what, though, Sarah? It's not about them.
No,
and
it's
I
not.
think,
But I've just like, oh my God, it's been recognised. Because I think, you know, at the end of the day, we all want to be recognised for the work that we put in.
Yeah.
And that recognition, it just meant so much at that stage. There've been a few moments like that, you know, not necessarily on the kind of recognition front, but, you know, I remember working with the National really closely throughout a lot of their career as well, and spending a week in Berlin with them where we had press fly in from all around the world. Literally, they were doing interviews every day, and it was when they released High Violet. And at the end of the week, they played in the courtyard of the hotel. And, you know, this was probably to about 250 people. And kind of halfway through that set, it was one of those kind of classic pinch me moments. I just went, fucking hell, I'm in Berlin and I'm watching the National play High Violet to 250 people. And this is my job.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was those moments where you go, all the crap days and all the lack of work-life balance, this, that and the other. Yeah, this is quite good actually, isn't it?
You're living your dream. It's like pinching you and you go, I'm actually doing this. I felt a little bit similar when I was sitting in the studio listening to Dave Grohl talk us through his Skies and Neighborhood. And I'm sitting there going, like Dave Grohl's like, there. And I'm like, here. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah. You're like, don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick. Yeah. Be cool, Rodney. You know that scene in Only Fools Horses, be cool, Rodney.
Yes.
And almost like, I felt like I was falling over at the same time through the bar.
Exactly.
And it was one of those moments you kind of go, fuck, like, this is my job.
Yeah.
They actually care about like what I think.
Yeah.
So those moments, I think, for you and I, we get a bit British about it and go, oh my God. You know, although I did once do a bit of a strip dance. Not a strip dance, I should say. It was a pole dance to Green Day. Now, I'm Green Day's biggest fan. I didn't know they were sitting behind me when I'd done it.
You're kidding me.
I was very drunk at a Kerrang Awards. And
I
grabbed the pole and I was sort of shaking my tush. And I looked behind me and there's Billy Joe. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Was this the days before camera phones?
Definitely, thank God.
Thank God, yeah.
Sadly, not the days before Absinthe, which I blame entirely. But the second part there, and I just love it because I think it's something that when people listen to this podcast, I just really hope they understand that you and I, we work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We're not on stage.
Exactly.
We're not, going to the crowd and say, come on, we're not shooting the T-shirts out of the guns.
Yeah.
Although, fuck, I really want to do that. Like that's, before I die, please let me shoot a T-shirt out of a gun. But that thank you is so important to us.
Oh, it was, honestly.
Because we do this because we love it.
Yeah, exactly. And it meant so much.
Yeah.
So much.
An amazing lesson to people working in the music industry. If you're an artist, just don't forget to thank the people behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they do work hard and they really appreciate the thank you.
Yeah.
They really do. Even though you might think, it seems a bit silly to sort of say thank you.
Or a bit obvious.
Yeah, it's a bit obvious. Obviously, I'm grateful. I just bought you a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a very male thing, isn't it? Obviously, I'm grateful. Here's a bottle of wine and some flowers. What else do you need? But I think that's really important. That thank you can really change a relationship, actually, with an artist.
Absolutely can. For a very kind of high intensity project, which, all of those were.
Yeah.
And that went
all eyes on
miles.
you with Adele, right? All eyes on you in that project. And for Jonathan to come up and go, thank you, Sarah, in front of a crowd, that is just...
it meant a lot.
And look, it's going to make you work even harder, right?
Exactly. It pays dividends,
Yeah. You're going to go, right, well, I've got to live up to it. And humans have this incredible sort of, I don't know, pre-designed thing within us where if we get... It's a bit like Pavlov, give us a biscuit.
Yeah, exactly.
We love it.
Yeah.
We'll behave like this, get a biscuit.
And we'll be back again,
Yeah, so, great. Okay, so if I keep working hard, I'll get another thank you.
Exactly.
And get that little
motivation,
dose of serotonin.
Inspiration. Yeah.
Absolutely. So look, it's been a great chat so far. Thank you so much. It's been really, really fun. And it's been really nice. We've seen lots of different textures within this conversation around some quite sensitive issues, some quite serious issues, and also just some funny shit, right? But the last question, which we ask everyone, is where do you see the music industry in 10 years' time? So if you can look into a crystal ball and you can kind of go, right, in the next 10 years, I think it's going to, you can be as crazy as you want, or you can be as practical as you want. People have different takes on this question. But where do you see the industry in 10 years?
I mean, if I slightly reframe that, think about the industry 10 years ago and think, right, did we know that we would be where we are today? I think probably to a point. I think we did. I don't think we thought that AI would have moved as quickly as it has. And I think over the next 10 years, that will obviously be probably headline number 1 or 2. One of the things that I'm endlessly impressed by, particularly when I go and see emerging artists play, is actually the quality of the musicianship is phenomenal. Long gone are the days of landfill indie. people can really play their instruments. They can really make music. I'd like to think that will only continue.
And even if they can't, I suppose there's plenty of tutorials and places you can go and learn now, which you couldn't do when we were young. If you had to go and learn to play an instrument, you had to find a person.
Exactly. Pay out £30 an hour or whatever it was. And
now you go on YouTube and everyone's an expert.
Exactly. And, and I think you can really see that coming through. So I would like to think that in 10 years' time, we'll have even more high quality creativity out there. Now, in terms of how that will look with routes to market, I don't think it's any secret that there is a lot of music goes out there every day. I think there will probably be some kind of change in terms of how that's policed.
Yep.
What that looks like, I don't know. But I still think, there was a stat the other day actually that said in one day alone this year there was more music released than in the whole of 1989.
Right.
And that was that was quite a stat.
Yeah.
So, I think there will be some kind of look at what volume looks like.
Yeah.
It's hard to even say what the industry will look like in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it feels so fast. Faster year on year. So I'm going to slightly bow out on that one and just say AI will have changed things, but it won't have taken the heart away. And that heart, I feel, beats stronger every year.
I feel you on that. And I can't imagine in 10 years' time people will have fallen out of love with music.
I don't think that will ever happen.
No.
Music is a language.
Yeah. I mean, our heart beats.
Yeah.
And I think there's something in that, not to get too philosophical here for a moment, but we beat naturally. So music is part of us.
The creative arts are based on emotion. Human beings feel emotion. There will always be a connection there. Always. Imagine the world without music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard.
And how many times you're exposed to music every day.
Yeah.
It's... it's almost like another sense.
I couldn't agree more. The world without music would be challenging. It would be challenging for most people.
It would just be beige.
Beige. No one wants a beige world.
Exactly.
Give me a kind of,
You want multicolour.
Terry.
Multicolour, 4D, textured. Every sensory area should push the boundaries.
Yeah, let's hope in 10 years' time people are still pushing those boundaries, because I think it's important. And I mean that, and I think that's been quite a nice summary of our chat, which we talked a lot about pushing the boundaries and whether you realise it or not, the importance of yourself in the music industry in driving some change and inclusion and diversity at the upper end of the music industry, which is where we need the most change.
100%.
And I think it's really inspiring for me to see your story and hear more about your story and some wonderful anecdotes in there. And I'm sure everyone listening will really enjoy them. So without further ado, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've covered some fantastic topics and really, really enjoyed chatting to you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you. It's really nice to get an opportunity to think back and think forward.
Absolutely. Well, I said we all keep doing that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to the Blind and Talent Music Industry Podcast with me, Mark Adams, and special thank you to our guest, Sarah Wilson.